You are listening to The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards.
Hello, this is Matthew Chiles and welcome to Innovation Impact, a series from The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards. Innovation, as defined in the ISO 56000 series, means creating or sharing value. In simple terms, it's about spotting opportunities, trying out ideas, and turning them into something that works in the real world. That definition reflects how we work at BSI. The BSI Group Innovation team helps the organisation explore new ideas, try things out, and helps to turn them into real opportunities that make a difference for people, clients, and society. Across this series, we look at how innovation really happens in practice, how ideas are found, tested, and explored, and how they move from early opportunity through to real concept. It's about how impact is created through experimentation, collaboration, and sometimes disruption along the way. For that journey, I'm joined by BSI Group Innovation Senior Engagement Manager Emma Glass, who will be helping guide us through the conversations in this series. Now, before we get down to it, here's Cindy Parakill with a quick reminder.
Hey, just a quick reminder to follow, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. Want to get in touch or find us on socials? All the links you need are in the show notes.
Auditors couldn't get into countries and into factories to do audits, and so we pivoted to immersive technology. And it's BSI's technology, and we were able to continue doing audits during COVID, which was most companies couldn't, right? And the technology itself is incredible.
Hey, Emma Glass.
Hey, Matthew Chiles.
So, Emma, this episode of Innovation Impact is all about innovative technologies. Identifying a problem and coming up with a solution to change a system, create greater efficiency, and embed a new way of doing things.
Yes, another example of innovation in action. And the voice we heard there was that of Jen Kistner, chairperson for the Supplier Compliance Audit Network, or SCAN, and director of Global Trade Compliance at Stanley 1913, the American outdoor and lifestyle brand that revolutionized drinkware by inventing the all-steel vacuum-insulated bottle. Jen was there at the foundation of SCAN back in 2014 and took on the role of chair more recently. So, in this episode, we will be hearing all about the impactful work of SCAN, very much an example of innovation in action.
Now, before we get into the initiative itself, tell us a bit more about BSI Group Innovation.
So at its core, the Group Innovation team helps BSI push beyond what it does. So we work across the organisation to identify challenges, bring together ideas, and develop and test them. That means improving outcomes for colleagues and clients, and making sure the concepts we design and shape are useful and responsible. And importantly, we create space to try things out. Innovation needs room to experiment, learn, and sometimes get things wrong. So we turn good ideas into outcomes that really make a difference. And of course, SCAN is a prime example of this, particularly when we hear more about the experimental technology used and the impact it has. So we will hear from two contributors today, Jen Kistner and Brittany DiStefano. Both have played an integral part in the work between SCAN and BSI.
Now, the SCAN team, they came to visit BSI headquarters in London recently to celebrate our 125th anniversary. And I think that was what prompted the interviews we're here today.
Yes, and it was great to get the SCAN team in the same room as the Group Innovation team to hear more about the history, the role and purpose of SCAN, and also for the Group Innovation team to share some of the great work that they're doing for BSI colleagues and clients and stakeholders.
So before we hear from them today, you've hinted at this, but tell us a bit more about SCAN.
So SCAN is a group of companies now. It began in 2014 with two companies, Walmart and BSI. And really at its foundations, it's identifying an issue with supply chain security audits. So after the 9/11 attacks, the Customs and Trade Partnership Against Terrorism was created. It was about securing US borders from weapons of mass destruction and required audits for foreign suppliers. So that's manufacturers and factories getting audited for the exact same audit every time. Basically, the team identified that there was a whole lot of audit fatigue and redundancy in this process. So I spoke with Jen Kistner first to understand more about the problem that was identified and the ambitions for this team to find a solution.
The problem with CT-PAT after 10, 15 years, and what Dave and Dan recognized was that companies were required to audit our foreign suppliers, so suppliers all over the globe, right? And some of those suppliers, especially in Southeast Asia, where we're heavy with all of the supply chain and suppliers, those factories and manufacturers were getting audited 5-6 times a year for the exact same criteria. So, you could have 10 different companies that were using the same factory, and everybody was auditing them for their CT-PAT criteria. So there was a whole lot of audit fatigue, redundancy, inefficiency, and it was expensive for the suppliers and the U.S. companies. And so they said, that we've got to find a solution for this. It's crazy, the inefficiencies that's going on. And so that was the concept behind SCAN. The Supplier Compliance Audit Network was sharing of audits, right? And so the team, they invited a certain number of companies to join in the development of SCAN. And at the time I was working for the Coleman Company, and I was their director of trade. And I was approached with, would you like to participate in the formation of this and this concept? So it was Home Depot, Walmart, Coleman, J.C. Penney's, and Husky Manufacturing, and got together and started talking about what would this look like. And it was really about creating a CT-PAT audit template that all of the companies agreed upon, creating an audit repository where these audits would be housed. And then if you were a member of SCAN, you could go into this repository and pull that audit and not have to re-audit that factory over and over and over again. And so that's really the concept behind SCAN, and they became it grew. We grew from those 5 original members to, in 2025, 2026, we have, I think, 67 members now, representing over $2 trillion worth of import revenue into the United States. So really a concept that was embraced by importers in the United States, large companies, and has really taken off and grown, and done a lot of really foundational aspects of SCAN, building the foundation, building the repository. There's over 38,000 audits in the audit repository, and audits have been conducted in 93 different countries.
What fantastic stats. Those are 38,000 audits in the repository, and audits conducted in 93 different countries.
Yes, and actually, Matthew, it's really interesting, and I think really important to get clarification on this as well. And please bear with me because there are lots of acronyms coming up. So interestingly, 9/11 was the catalyst that triggered CBP, so that's the Customs Border Protection, to create the CT-PAT program. And this is talked more about in the episode. But this fundamentally ensures that dangerous people and goods don't enter the US through the supply chain or weaponize the supply chain against the US. And it was then, after 14 years of this change, that it was very clear that a new approach was needed to be taken that maintained the integrity and the safety, but really moved away from the audit fatigue and the duplication of efforts that were being experienced.
Jen mentioned that there were 60-member companies and sort of the growth that we've seen there. Tell us more about the membership and the makeup of that group.
So SCAN has 60 member companies, but it's quite interesting. I think that the influence is better measured by the size and reach of its members than by the number of companies itself. And the membership includes, major retailers, US retailers, and brands, importers that I'm sure many people have heard of, such as Walmart, Target, Costco, Macy's. But collectively, SCAN members represent more than 1.5 trillion in annual revenue, which I think is, an incredible and very staggering figure. And this is along with significant global sourcing and import activity as well. And scan audits are carried out by 7 approved audit firms, and this includes BSI Group. So with the audits, they're all allocated through an equal rotation. And, of course, this is the standards show. The audits use SCAN's proprietary supply chain security standard, which has been developed to align with the US CBP CTPAP minimum security criteria. So that's the membership, Matthew, and in a whirlwind. But now I want to move us on and really take a deeper dive into where the innovation and the technology has been particularly impactful.
A huge impact from sustainability, like carbon emissions. So when you think about, so when companies were being audited 6 and 7 times, in a year, factories being audited, that's auditors traveling, and sometimes, international travel to get to those factories, and then, performing the audit and all of the impact on the environment and travel, and, the factories being audited 6 and 7 times. And so, from a carbon emission perspective, a huge impact, right? You have auditors going 1 time instead of 6 or 7. We call it the force multiplier, right? It just continues to grow and multiply, and the savings there, like when you think about, just like I said, carbon emissions alone, huge amount of savings and impact on the environment and sustainability.
So this is the main takeaway for me, the collaboration between SCAN and BSI to create a solution in a really challenging situation that, of course, then enables and ensures that, the continued work, the safety, and the auditing of key factories at a really difficult and challenging time.
That definitely comes through, actually. I presume that continues to be of use now as well, in terms of also the sustainability element. That's really worth noting here.
Yeah, of course. And I think the immersive technology allows for a significant reduction in carbon emissions. So if you consider that a company or a manufacturer might have been audited, say, 6 or 7 times a year, think of the accumulation of carbon emissions in that time. And now auditors go once a year, and the impact on the environment is significant. And, Matthew, that's all thanks to the immersive technology that SCAN is employing. So on this and kind of looking beyond, I asked Jen to talk more about the future of SCAN.
We have a strategic plan, and where we're looking at just starting, this year in 2026 is really about growing globally. We want to move just from being a CTPAT, U.S. import, primarily focused into more of a global focus, and when that would include AEO. So AEO is kind of the sister to CTPAT. AEO was around long before CTPAT was, and it's the authorized economic operator, and that's what they call really the supply chain security program in a lot of other countries. And so our focus is, opening up our membership to companies outside of the U.S. that have an AEO program, have what we call a mutual recognition agreement with U.S. Customs. So they're very similar to what the CTPAT program in the U.S. is. It's the same program in other countries, but it's called AEO. We all are following the same criteria to ensure that our imports into our country are safe and secure. And so it's about how do we take this and go global, really, which changes a whole lot of things, right? It changes, we're looking at, our audit templates, and what do we need to make changes, from a CTPAT AO perspective? How do we promote in other countries? How do we get the visibility? We have visibility from, the factory perspective, if there's factories that we've audited in other countries, but the actual importing companies in those other countries, that's where we need to get the visibility, and with the customs agencies in those other countries. So our focus is really from a big picture. It's that's how do we grow globally.
That is a really lovely sentiment to conclude with, I think, and I really love the ambition SCAN is shooting for as well.
This was a really interesting example of when innovation really comes into its own. And as I'm sure, we talked about a lot, COVID really forced many people and organizations to adapt and think differently in, the most challenging of circumstances. So here we hear from Jen as she talks about that instance in which this took place.
One of the biggest wins we've had from a technology perspective and with BSI was during COVID. And, auditors couldn't get into countries and into factories to do audits. And so we pivoted to immersive technology. And it's BSI's technology. And we were able to continue doing audits during COVID, which was most companies couldn't, right? And the technology itself is incredible. I'll give you an example. So U.S. Customs during COVID, they did what they called immersive audits, but it was really just like a Teams call. And so you'd get on, the phone with the company and you'd go through their process and procedures and look at their audits and that kind of stuff. But it was really just a Teams call. And what a CT-PAT validation really includes, and when U.S. Customs goes and does a revalidation in person, they visit a foreign factory, right? And so what we were able to do was use with the immersive technology, and the point we made with it is, it isn't just a Teams call. It's like truly being immersed in the factory. You can feel like, from an auditor perspective, that you are sitting in the factory. They have the technology when they're doing like the factory tour and looking at the documents. There's just things that you don't get from a Teams call, right? And the person at the factory can be walking around with this technology, and the CT-PAT officer, the U.S. Customs officer, could say, stop right there. I want to look at that fence. I want to see that hole in the fence, and could actually see in live action what's going on in the factory. And it changed everything. I mean, the immersive technology was absolutely incredible. So it helped us overcome challenges in the COVID space, right? And really kept us moving forward with the program during a time when everybody else was shut down.
Standards affect all of us, every day, everywhere. By defining good practice, they help people and organizations do things better. Each year, standards bodies publish thousands of standards, and we're always looking for more people like you to join our growing community of standards makers. We welcome applicants from all backgrounds, areas of expertise, and career stages. Our goal is simple: to bring a balance of perspectives to the table. As a standards maker, you can help improve how things are made and done, whether it's building more inclusive workplaces, improving healthcare, advancing AI governance, accelerating climate action, and much more. If you want to make a difference and help shape the world through standards, start your standards making journey today. Details on how to get involved are in the show notes.
Now, Emma, you also interviewed our colleague, Brittany DiStefano, as she leads on SCAN from BSI's perspective. Can you tell us a bit more about that before we get into the detail?
Yes, so BSI plays a really unique role in this instance. So Brittany sits on the board as Dan Patel's proxy. Dan Patel is the Senior Vice President of Innovation. And Brittany facilitates the traceability working groups and really helps SCAN expand globally and across sectors. And for those who don't know, so Consulting Services at BSI is the program manager for SCAN, and they assign the audits to all the firms. They manage all the corrective actions, and they provide quarterly business reviews to the audit firms as well. So they're really, in support and the program manager for SCAN. Assurance, on the other hand, is just one of the 7 approved audit firms that conduct a portion of the audits. And I mentioned this a bit earlier as well. So it's useful to make that clarification. So I asked Brittany to explain further about BSI's role and involvement in SCAN.
BSI plays a pretty unique role with SCAN. We act as the independent program manager and also one of the approved audit bodies in SCAN's equal audit rotation. In fact, our ability to separate our consulting services and assurance services has really positioned us perfectly to serve SCAN in an unbiased manner, as both entities operate independently of one another and are able to avoid any, unintentional bias. And then on the consulting side, we facilitate every aspect of the program. So from managing audit assignments to overseeing corrective actions for every facility and acting as that conduit between members, auditors, and the board. And this includes delivering things like membership meeting updates, conducting the audit firm's quarterly business reviews. We deliver factory trainings and support, committees and working groups. And really, kind of going back to the history there, we've also really helped design the program from scratch, but it's not just stagnant. We work to continuously improve it for SCAN. So whether that's fine-tuning the audit framework, introducing new audit schemes, which we're actually working on right now, or bringing in new technologies from our innovation team, such as blockchain and immersive audits. So kind of the way that I think of it is SCAN's industry-led, but it's really enabled by BSI. It's very much a partnership where members define the vision and then we help operationalize it. So I'd say that's a big part of our role and how we work together.
Emma, I think it's worth reinforcing the message here that obviously we have different divisions within BSI and we have a sort of clear delineation between them. In this instance, within this particular initiative, between assurance and consulting services.
Yes, and I think that really shows, again, the breadth and scale of BSI's work. And Brittany, mentioned the different working groups that have evolved. And I think this, again, indicates the kind of growth and evolution of SCAN as it moves into a more holistic and global approach. And I think this evolution to creating MOUs at a global scale is really interesting. So I asked Brittany to tell us more about the partnerships beyond the relationship with BSI, and specifically to go into more detail about the work with US Customs and the MOU that has been signed.
That partnership really validates the SCAN model. So it represents an important milestone for SCAN and honestly for how supply chain security is evolving more broadly. So at a high level, the MOUs are about one thing, turning data into trust and trust into tangible trade benefits. So what these agreements do is formally recognize the SCAN model as a credible, independent source of supply chain assurance. So instead of customs, relying purely on periodic validations or self-attestation, they now have access to continuously updated, independently verified audit data through SCAN. So for members, that unlocks some real practical advantages. They get stronger recognition of their factories as low risk, and they can demonstrate best practice in meeting CT-PAT and AEO requirements, which will then translate into fewer inspections, faster clearance, and more predictability at the border. But I think the bigger shift is what this does at a system level. So these MOUs essentially extend trusted trade beyond individual companies and into the broader supply chain ecosystem, where critical information is shared freely to increase visibility for stakeholders and protect global supply chains and those organizations' reputations. So essentially, SCAN becomes a bit of a force multiplier for customs. It gives them better visibility upstream, helps them segment risk more effectively, and reinforces that the companies investing in real ongoing due diligence, they should see benefits for their efforts. And all that is done while maintaining data confidentiality. So members are getting the upside of visibility and recognition without compromising sensitive commercial information, which was really important to them. So when you step back, it's not just a partnership. It's really a signal that the industry is moving toward a more data-driven, globally connected model of trusted trade with SCAN right at the center of it.
I like the comment Brittany made there. It's not just a partnership, but the industry is moving towards a sort of a more global, trusted focus on trade.
Yeah, I agree. And I asked Brittany about the collaboration more specifically with innovation and the impact that it has had. So she, of course, referenced the COVID example that Jen mentioned earlier, and also an interesting case around blockchain as well. So she talked about the inclusion of blockchain to confirm the kind of truth and accuracy and the consequence of this increasing trust as well.
This is one of the key differentiators that BSI can bring to the table is leaning on the innovation team that Dan leads to bring in really advanced digital capabilities that elevate the entire program. And SCAN has taken advantage of those benefits. It's been absolutely critical to the association because the challenges facing the industry are massive and they need trusted digital means to keep up with this pace of change. So two call outs of how we've supported SCAN from a digital point of view include immersive audits and blockchain technology. So on the immersive audits, SCAN decided to implement this once COVID hit to ensure that they didn't lose visibility of sites that they couldn't travel to. BSI, we were in a very fortunate position because the innovation team had been testing virtual audit technologies for quite some time in advance of COVID so that when the pandemic hit, we were fully ready with vetted tech that could be implemented directly with the SCAN audit repository, which is a customized BSI Connect product seamlessly. And so Scan used immersive technology to audit sites during COVID, and they continue to use the tech for immersive audits today in high-risk travel regions that are unsafe to visit in person. And in addition to the continuity of operations, immersive auditing is also allowed for remote shadow audits, which members in the board, they love taking advantage of that so that they can shadow foreign audits being delivered and remotely participate without incurring pretty high travel costs to get there themselves. And then in addition to the immersive auditing, we've also implemented blockchain in the Scan program. So once Scan became popular years ago and began to be recognized in the market, bad actor suppliers, if you will, attempted to create fraudulent Scan audits with inflated compliance scores. So to address that, BSI implemented blockchain within the Scan audit repository, which effectively added a QR code to the cover page of the audit report that made it foolproof for anyone receiving the audit to confirm that it's true and accurate. So overall, that really increases trust and confidence in the program for brands and also the government access alike. So those are a couple of ways that Scan has embraced, BSI's innovative technologies. And as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, they're really looking at some of the things that we have in the works now for, future integration as well.
Matthew, I wanted to give the final word to Jen. So I asked her if there was one thing that people should understand about Scan, what would that be? And here is what she said.
We have 6 or 7, I can't remember exactly the number of audit providers. So Scan doesn't do the audits. We have companies that are audit service providers, but we train them and they have to be certified every year to do the audit. So we're very particular about the quality that we present, right? From an audit perspective, from our audit service providers, our member perspective. I think one thing I want everyone to take away with what an incredible organization Scan is, not just because we're doing these great audits and making such an impact from an audit perspective and a sustainability perspective and an innovation perspective, but from who the people are, who the companies are, who the people who are behind Scan and the people that are, we have committee chairs and the board of directors, and a lot of this is volunteer time. We only have a very few paid positions, and that just happened in 2026. So, built on a group of volunteers who really were passionate about supply chain security, passionate about what Scan does. And so we're not just another organization. I think we're an organization with heart.
Well, Emma, I think we should wrap up with some thank yous.
Yes, I've got to say some very sincere thanks for our contributions and contributors to the episode, for these really fantastic conversations and, a really great example of innovation in action. So to Jen Kistner, Chair of Scan and Director of Global Compliance Trade at Stanley 1913, and of course to Brittany DiStefano, Enterprise Account Director at BSI. And thank you to you, Matthew Chiles.
Well, thank you, Emma Glass. To find out more about the themes raised in this episode, other episodes in the Innovation Impact series, and about how to get involved in standards, then follow the links in the show notes. And the show notes are also where you can find details of our socials and all the other ways to get in touch with us here on The Standard Show.
You have been listening to an episode of The Standard Show, the podcast that brings you the stories behind the standards.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.